All right, let's begin. We're going to try to get everything that we need, including the wall, next to the mat. So if you have to drag your mat to another location, just so we don't have to move around a whole lot. And let's start with the broomstick right nearby. And we're going to be on our back. We're going to work on this resistance, not even resistance, it's more of a leveraged stretch to start things off. This one gets a little confusing if you've never done it before, so I will try to kind of deconstruct it real slowly. You're going to start on your back with both knees bent, and then we'll just lift the right leg up to about 90 degrees of flexion. And you're going to take your rod outside the frame of your thigh, close to your knee, and then angle it inward so you can hook it on the inside of your heel. I usually have to hold my stick with both hands or it kind of slips off my knee there. Now we're going to start to pull that rod across our body to the left, and our heel's going to turn out to the right. So now we've got that hip internally rotating, and I'm going to actually show this from another view in case it's hard for you to see. So we start with the dowel outside, hook it inside the heel, and then the whole leg turns inward. And we can use a little bit of that leverage to seek out our passive range of motion. And all that means is we're not just using our muscles to get this position, but we're using the little bit of assistance or leverage from the dowel to find what is our true end range, which is actually, I guess we could define that as our flexibility. If you're having any trouble hearing me or anything, just give me a shout. I'm actually going to turn that music down a little bit more. I feel like it's kind of loud. And once you find that passive range, let's just see if we can pause and breathe for a little bit. And in terms of the hip position and even the knee position, ideally we want to keep that thigh bone in a vertical orientation and resist the urge to let the knee drift in or out away from the hip. So that would be like crossing over towards the left or pulling out to the side. Instead, we'll try to keep that knee joint directly focused over the hip. But you could test and see how it feels to pull that internally rotated hip closer to you or a little further away from you. The knee angle won't change, but the hip angle might change. We're going to give this about another minute on this side. After some time, you might notice that there's just a few more degrees available, but we never want to force anything, especially when we have this long stick to leverage things. See if you can keep an even weight distribution on the back side of your pelvis and your shoulders. Smooth your breath. Maybe we're slowing the exhales again to get us into that relaxation response. And let's let everything just kind of come back to neutral before we do the other side. So that could be 2 straight legs. That could be just keeping your knees bent, sliding your feet down. If you feel like you want to move a little bit, that would be all right too. All right, let's move on. Same thing, left side. Start with your dowel to the outside edge of your thigh close to your knee, and then sweep it to the inside of your heel. And then as you twist the top side of the stick over to your right, the bottom of the stick and your heel are gonna fan and spin outward. And you're not resisting this. Like one time when we did this, we kind of pressed back into the object, but we're not doing that today. We're just gonna use our end range, assisted by the dowel. Every now and then taking a peek and making sure we still got knee over pelvis and it hasn't drifted out or in. About 3 more breaths or so. And then we'll just release again, do what feels right. I'm gonna do a few windshield wipers. And in our next setup, we're gonna need to be able to push against something heavy with our feet, such as the wall or a really heavy ottoman or a couch. And I can show you the setup first so that you can get an idea of what we're doing. We're gonna be on, let's go on the right side first. Knees are gonna be bent at 90 degrees, feet are pushing into the wall, and then we're gonna lay down on the right shoulder or use a block underneath your head. As you press your bottom leg into the wall, you're gonna rotate the left hip. Don't get too fussy with these. You're just using the right leg to push into the wall or your furniture, and then you're just freely mobilizing your left hip. So Joan, if you feel like you are running into the wall, you can turn the other direction. So that instead of your body laying parallel to the wall, you're laying perpendicular to the wall. That's going to give you a little more movement behind you with that top leg, potentially. On that top arm, that left arm can just kind of push back down into the ground and resist. And then let's reach back with the top leg here. So we're in hip extension, but we're trying not to arch the back. Now let's spiral the left hip to internal rotation. So your toes are gonna start to pivot towards the ceiling, but we're still pushing and kicking into the wall with the right leg. Now keep that internal hip rotation and guide your leg forward as if you were going to tap that left elbow with your knee. But keep trying to point the toes up. Move your hip back into extension. You're trying to get that shin bone vertical. It's not going to get there, but that's like the idea in your mind. Now pull that leg forward, but keep rotating your hip inward. I'm going to try to touch your left arm or elbow. May not make it. And kick back again. Keep rotating inward. Keep kicking into the wall with the right foot. A couple more. Pull forward, rotate inward. Reach backward, rotate inward. Last one. If you got started a little bit late and you want to do a few more, feel free. Otherwise, just lay on your back, both feet against the wall. Send your arms out to a T and breathe. Relax head, neck, and shoulders. Feel a balanced weight on the shoulders. and the hips. Natural curves in your spine. And then let's do the same thing. Flip over onto the left side, pressing both feet into the wall. Knees are going to stack to start. Rest your left arm underneath your head. Kick into the wall. Right arm can help support you. And as you press with the left, mobilize the right into a circle. Trying to find the most honest rotation that we can without wobbling too much anywhere else. There's going to be a little bit of that, of course. Maybe visualizing the mechanical ball and socket aspect of this joint and seeing how it feels to move in all of those directions. And we're going to get into that kick back. Try to reach your toes behind you. Turn your hip in, thinking of trying to get your toes a little higher and the top side of your right thigh a little bit more facing the floor. Keep the rotation and pull that leg out in front of you like you're going to tap your right elbow. Reach it back. Keep spiraling in. Feel the glutes engage. And then drive it forward. Find your hip flexion. 2 more times. Pivot back. Keep pressing with the left foot, generating that stability. Same thing with that right arm. We've got 1 more like this. Last one, we can pull it forward. Keep the inward rotation. And then just lay on your back. Take it easy. I meant to turn my heater off. Yes, my heat is actually running. Okay, so our next stop is going to be in another passive stretch before we get to moving into the loaded stuff. So now you're going to use the wall from hands and knees. So just kind of back your feet up to the wall. This is where you could have a little extra padding underneath your knees. Let's step our left foot forward and then kind of center yourself on your mat again. So with your left foot forward, you might want to move over towards the left edge of your mat so that your right knee is closer to the center. And as you back yourself up to the wall, you're going to pivot right hip inward. That's going to move your foot outside the frame of your hip. And now we want to scoot back against the wall even more so that we can push our foot back into it. So you should be making a connection, maybe with the ball of your foot, maybe with the heel. Your toes could still be on your mat. Now, if this is already like pretty intense for you, it's fine. You're going to stay here. If you wanted to come upright in the trunk, you're going to use your stick to help with your balance and just walk yourself up like this. Press down into the floor with your dowel. Keeping your right hip internally rotated, squeeze the right glute, tuck under with your pelvis, and now you're going to spin your chest to the right. So it's almost like you're trying to look over your right shoulder to spot your right heel behind you. Potentially, you would take your right hand up to the wall, pressing down into the floor with your dowel with the left hand. Keep that right glute hugging and squeezing, and we're breathing. See if we can stack the rib cage directly over the pelvis. And again, trying to scoop under with the whole pelvis, especially the right side. Notice that left leg might want to cave in on you a little bit, so you can try to fan your left knee out towards the pinky toe edge of your foot and use the wall and the dowel for your stability. 2 more slow breaths. And then use the support of your dowel. Walk your hands back down it. Come onto your hands and your knees. You can get yourself back to a tabletop position on your forearms. Knees under the hips, more or less. And let's just get the spine moving a little bit here. Take a little break from the hip stuff and move through some cats and cows on the forearms. And then scoot yourself a little bit more towards the right edge of your mat so that your left knee is more central. Scoot all the way back so your feet are touching the mat. Step your right foot forward, or sorry, the wall I meant. Step your right foot forward. Pivot your left hip in so your toe kicks out to the side, and then move back enough against the wall that you can push against it with left foot. It doesn't have to be your whole left foot, just some part of it. So I have my toes on my mat, and then my foot is kind of moving up the wall. And then I'm using this dowel so that I feel more stable, walking up it, pulling it a little closer to me so I can almost lean back towards the wall. Squeeze your left tush, press down into your right leg. Try to keep that vertical stack, cylinder, shoulders over the hips, and then a little rotation into that trailing leg, as if you could peek over that left shoulder and look down towards your left heel. Left hand can hold the wall. And we're here for a little time. Okay, we can unravel the twist first. Crawl your hands back down the stick so your hands can come to the floor. Resituate your legs back to either regular tabletop, or you could do the forearm tabletop again, and we'll let the spine move back and forth, flexion, extension. And then you're going to want to turn yourself so that you are the long ways on your mat. So you're going to turn your heart towards the long edge rather than the short edge. And come back to tabletop. We're going to crawl the knees wide, wider. At least wider than the hips. Doesn't have to be a whole lot more than that. Turn your toes towards the outsides. So we're essentially in a frog pose. We're not going to get into our deepest deep range. So let's be a little more conservative. Start with your hands underneath you. You can crawl them forward as you like. Take a look back at your ankles and try to get them to land directly below your knees. And then also with the bum, we're going to try not to scoot back or too far forward. Instead, keep that hip joint directly in line with your knee joint. Now, option here is to come down onto the forearms. That's going to give you less spine extension, which is probably a good thing. And then think of pulling your pubic bone forward towards your sternum and slightly tucking your tail under. So we're in our little frog and we're breathing. If this is already a lot, you're not going to change a thing. If you wanted to work on a little bit more internal hip rotation, you're going to keep your heels centered behind your knees. Roll your thighs inward so that your lower legs pivot off the ground. If automatically your low back dips into a hammock, then keep your feet grounded. And just imagine that they get a little lighter. Rest your heels back on the ground. Press back to your palms. Tuck your toes so you can push into your big toes and bring your legs back in. Next thing we'll need is our dumbbell. So I have a 5-pounder, that might be a bit much. If you aren't using a weight, it's fine. We can just do body weight, or you could put your ankle weight around your ankle. We'll start with that weight behind the right knee, giving it a good squeeze. Option 1, you stay in tabletop. Option 2, you lower to the forearms in tabletop. Neutralize the back, try to broaden across your shoulder blades, kick your leg back behind you, and hover it at about the height of your hip. Now we're going to rotate inward again. So turn the top side of your thigh towards your other leg and let your heel bone turn outward. We're just holding and lifting and breathing and stabilizing for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, a little higher, 5, 4, 3, 2. Slowly lower the weight and your knee. Set it off to the side and then step your right foot off of your mat straight out to the side. Come onto the inside edge of your foot and then try to roll on your heel so that your toes point upward. This is your external rotation hip. If this is nice, you stay here. If you want something a little different, you can rock back and set your left bum on or near your left heel. Keep rotating your right thigh outwards, and you could sit up if you wanted to. Otherwise, we're just taking about 3 breaths anywhere along this path. And then let's do the same thing on the other leg. Focused internal rotation with weight. Keeping spine nice and set, so we're not getting a back bend here. Kick back, doesn't have to be very high. Rotate medially and lift it and hold it and breathe. My left leg doesn't seem to want to get very high today. Your ankle, I should have mentioned, can be pointed or flexed, doesn't matter what your toes are doing. What feels like it offers you a little bit more encouragement for the hip extension? Is it pointed or flexed? Keep turning that hip inward. Last 5, 4, and 3, and 2, and 1. Set it down, weight off to the side. Left foot's gonna shoot straight out from our hip, and we're gonna roll onto the inside edge of our foot. Start to turn open that left hip, trying to roll the kneecap towards the ceiling. You can stay here or sit back any amount. And then we have just a couple standing options for today. We won't need the dumbbell, but you're probably going to want your stick to help you balance, or you could once again set up next to your wall. So just get yourself to standing however you want. Okay, let's stand on our right leg. This left leg could really be doing anything. I'm just going to let mine kind of hang out here. You could play around with having it out in front of you. I think that might be better. Or you could just like let it dangle beside you. You'll have to kind of feel that out. The dowel could be in your right hand to help you balance, or you could be holding onto the wall. Now, a lot of times what we'll do is rotate the the floating leg, but today we're actually going to spin on this standing hip. And instead of turning open only and back to neutral, we're going to turn our trunk into the standing leg. Kneecap and toes are going to stay facing forwards, and you're going to try to get the rest of your body to turn around that hip. You could even turn so much that you replace right hand with the left hand on the dowel and turn and maybe reach back with the right hand to the wall. Squeeze your butt. Turn into the right hip. And breathe. Unwind yourself. Replace both feet. Oh. Take a second. And then put your dowel in your left hand. Stand on your left foot. Bring your right leg out in front of you. Try to keep the right leg just passive. It's just so long for the ride. We're thinking of turning everything into the left hip, including the pelvis, including the rib cage. Once you get far enough into that left side rotation, your right hand can hold the stick and your left hand can come behind you. Squeeze the left bum, tuck under, scoop under, and turn everything around that left hip axis. Try to make sure the knee stays facing the front. And then unravel yourself. This time we're going to use our dowel to create a feedback connection on the back of the ribs. So you're just going to hook it behind your ribs and around your elbow, the inside of the elbow. And let's make a lunge position. Right leg forward, left leg backward. It doesn't really matter too much how much you have the leg split. It's just going to change the loading profile. So the more weight you shift into this front leg, obviously the more challenge it's going to have as it rotates. Now we're going to think of two separate movements here, actually three. The first is a hip hinge. So you're leaning into the right hip, finding flexion. And then you're going to turn, again, everything into the right hip, including the left side of the pelvis, which we usually don't want to rotate. But for today's practice, we're going to try to turn the left pelvis towards the right thigh, trying to keep the connection between dowel and ribs. Now open everything like you would for a warrior two and bring your trunk upright, set your left heel down and open kind of towards the side of your mat. So it's a really soft warrior two. And then as you lift your left heel, you're going to pivot everything around that right hip. You can even turn your left toes to the right if they want to go that way. Hold and breathe. Keep the ribs and the dowel connected. Unravel the twist. Reset the left foot all the way down like you would for warrior two. And then bring your trunk vertical. Let's try for 3 more like that for a total of 5. Left heel lifts. We pivot on the ball. Everything turns into the right hip. Right knee stays pretty much over the toes or the ankle. Unwind. Open to the side. Now we're in external rotation. My foot is getting away from me. I got to shorten my stride. Last 2, lift and pivot. Cross your body. And unrotate. Reset. This is our last one on this side. If you wanted to get a little fancy with this one, you can get into that rotation and then float your back leg off the floor and also turn that hip in. Breathing for 3. 2. Left toes touch down. We can open up to the side of the mat and let both legs neutralize. Might be feeling a sweet burn around the right hip. Let's just pivot. You can switch your legs or you can turn to the back of the mat, whichever feels better for you. Starting in that split stance or that lunge stance, tip forward so you're in a little bit of a hinge. Everything rolls open to the left now. Whole body trying to turn into the left thigh. Dowel and ribs stay touching. Gradually opening around, planting your foot, bringing the trunk up. Lift, pivot, rotate in. Left knee might want to drift out, keep it over the ankle. unrotate, real slow. Bring it up, reset. And we've got 3 more. Heel up, pivot on the toes. Body moves into that left hip. Reverse out, reset. Maybe shorten your stride if it's getting a little too long. Last couple. And remember on that final one, if you wanted to try to do it in a balance, you can hinge, spin, lean into the left leg more. As the right leg lifts, you can try to think of turning it inward as well. Breathing for 3, 2, drop the right toes, pivot open to that wide leg straddle. And then you can just hold that dowel behind your back. Your hands can turn any direction, and you might decide you want to change it after we get into the fold. But we're going to use this now for just a little bit of a shoulder stretch. So as we tip forward over the legs, you can reach up and over with your dowel. I have an underhand grip right now, but I think I'm going to switch it and see how it feels to take an overhand grip. The wider your hands are, the less intensity there will be in the shoulder stretch. And the closer your hands get, obviously, the more intense it could be. And then bring that dowel to just behind your low back. Root down through your feet. Keep your shoulders out of your ears. Connect to your backside strength to come back up to standing. And that is all I have for you today. We are done. You can pretend like you are a samurai with your dowel. Do some fancy, maybe even Star Wars moves. Watch me knock something over. And for those of you who are in Zoom, we can chat. If you have any questions about anything, some of that was new, so feel free to ask, and I'll see you next time.